Hi, I'm Jeremy Levin, and I'm glad you're here with us today. Welcome to 6 Minutes on Israel from the Aid Coalition.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to unpack something incredibly intense, the emotional and logistical weight on Israeli families with children in the military.
And specifically, we're contrasting that with the total exemption from service for the ultra-Orthodox public. It's a story about a social contract that feels, to many, like it's breaking.
We'll be focusing on the experiences of three women, Ayelet, Sarit, and Michal. Their accounts really bring this whole issue to life.
They absolutely do.
So let's start with that emotional toll. You hear these accounts, and the first thing that hits you is the state of constant hypervigilance. Take Michal. She's a mother of four. 3 of her kids are combat soldiers.
3. 2 in mandatory service and 1 in reserves, fighting in Gaza right now. It's an unimaginable weight.
And she described her life as just waiting.
Yeah.
Waiting for that second check mark on a WhatsApp message.
Just to know the message was seen.
Yeah.
That they're okay enough to have looked at their phone. I mean, those 2 little blue ticks are everything.
Exactly. It's the only thing between calm and, well, sheer panic. And it's all tied to this absolute dread of what she calls the knock on the door.
The official notification? Every military family knows what that means.
She said she'd wake up in the night just convinced she'd heard it, lying there pleading, no, not again. That fear is just always there.
And it's not just the fear, it's the demand. Her oldest son finished his mandatory service and was immediately sent into 4 months of reserve duty in Gaza.
No break.
No break at all. That's the strain right there. The system relies so heavily on this one group of people because the base of service is so narrow.
Which brings up this other layer of complexity. Michal, while her sons are fighting, is also protesting some of the government's policies.
That's a huge conflict. You're demonstrating against the very leadership that's directing the war your children are risking their lives in.
She talked about having impossible conversations around the dinner table with her kids, who tend to hold more right-wing views.
It just shatters that idea of simple, unified patriotism. It becomes a feeling of deep betrayal.
And that word, betrayal, came up again with Sarit. She's an Israeli-American mother, 3 kids, also tied to the IDF.
And she said it plainly. She's questioning her choice to even live in Israel.
Because her kids are on the line every day, and at the same time, she's watching the ultra-Orthodox parties pushing a law to make their exemption permanent.
Just feels like a slap in the face, a total injustice.
For Ayelet, the founder of the Mothers on the Front Line movement, there was a specific tipping point. It was March 2023.
Right. Her son was about to enlist, and the Minister of Defense issues this stark warning about the country being in danger.
And then what happens? The Prime Minister fires him.
And almost in the next breath, the ultra-Orthodox parties demand their exemption law as the price for keeping the coalition government together.
For her, that was it. She said she realized security had become completely politicized.
Just a bargaining chip.
So let's talk about the politics here, because there's a huge misconception. People think a new law is needed to draft the ultra-Orthodox.
But that's not quite right. A draft law already exists. The real issue is a complete lack of enforcement.
A political decision not to enforce it.
Purely political. We're talking about roughly 150,000 students learning Torah who aren't serving.
And that number, 150,000, is basically the same size as the entire active army.
Exactly. So this is all about coalition politics. To keep a majority, the government has to give the ultra-Orthodox parties what they want, and what they want is non-enforcement.
And Michael pointed out the hypocrisy of it all. The military bends over backwards to create special units for the few who do serve.
Right, units without women to ensure purity. So you have resources being diverted to accommodate them while everyone else's kids have their service extended.
It's just a profound inequality.
Yeah.
And that's what drove Ayelet to start Mothers on the Front Line.
And the movement just caught fire. Grew to 70,000 members.
They're fighting this on all fronts, right?
Yeah.
What she called the 360-degree strategy.
Yep. They're in the streets protesting, they're lobbying in the Knesset, and this is huge. They've filed a case with the Supreme Court to demand enforcement of the law.
And she says it's already making a difference.
It is. About 3,000 ultra-Orthodox men joined the army this year. That's more than ever before. It shows that when real pressure is applied, things can change.
But beyond the politics, the movement is also a support system. Both Michal and Ayelet called it a hugging network.
It's a resilience community, a place to turn when you're terrified or when your kid comes home with PTSD. Isla is the first person Michelle calls when she can't reach her son in Gaza, not the army.
That says so much about the trust deficit.
It really does.
Now, before we finish, we should mention the group that hosted this discussion.
Right, the AID Coalition. That's the America-Israel Democracy Coalition.
They're a U.S.-based nonpartisan organization. Their goal is to help strengthen Israel's democratic foundations.
They support groups on the ground, like the ones in the democracy protests and these equality movements.
So when you pull it all together, this deep dive really shows that the cost of service is made so much worse by this failure of shared national responsibility.
And it's a failure driven by political compromises, not by some unavoidable religious necessity. That's the key argument from Elet, Sarit, and Mahal.
Which leaves you with a really challenging question to think about. What does it cost a democracy when the government prioritizes its own political survival over the equitable defense of the nation?
The answer seems to be paid in the daily fear and the profound betrayal felt by the families who are, right now, shouldering that burden almost entirely alone.
You matter, and this work matters. Thank you for listening and for being part of our community. If you enjoyed this episode and want to dive deeper, you can watch the full webinar on our YouTube channel. If our work resonates with you, please consider supporting the AID Coalition with a donation. Your contributions help us keep creating meaningful content and advancing our mission. Thank you for being with us. I look forward to being with you again in the next episode.